So this week's Multiple Choice Monday is looking at testing for ions. And we're told that a metal salt produced a white precipitate and also fizzed on addition of nitric acid. So if we focus only on one of these pieces of information, we could easily get it wrong. Ironically, if we focused on a different piece of information, there's only one possible right answer, which is sodium carbonate. And the reason that's the only possible right answer is that carbonates are the only ones that fizz when you add acid. And that's because of this equation here, the ionic equation. The hydrogen ions react with the carbonate ion to make CO2 gas and H2O. Sulfate ions and nitrate ions do not react with acids. That makes sense, of course, because usually the origin of sulfate ions and nitrate ions is nitric acid and sulfuric acid. So we could actually answer it simply by using the fizzing as a clue. Let's just go through the other options and see why they are wrong though. So A, silver nitrate and barium chloride. Well, I am bringing together silver ions and chloride ions. So I will make a white precipitate, and that we should know that as our test for chloride ions. Of course, there's no fizzing, but just to be aware that we would make a white precipitate there. B would also produce a white precipitate, this time because of the presence of the sulfate ion, which would form solid barium sulfate. The reason that many of these precipitates are white is because actually the majority of inorganic compounds are white in colour, especially if they contain group 1 and group 2, they can only be white. If they contain silver, silver chloride is the only white one, and then there are obviously your cream and your yellow for chloride and for iodide and bromide. However, transition metal salts are generally coloured. Group 1 and 2 are not going to have any colour in them. Magnesium sulfate is also going to make the same barium sulfate precipitate. So basically, if you do that thing where you focus on the first part of the question, you could easily have chosen any one of these three answers. You need to put it together with the fact that carbonate ions fizz. So you may be wondering, or may think that you've not heard of a white precipitate with carbonates. So one of the things we should know about all our ions tests is we always add an acid when we test for negative ions or for anions. So when we add silver nitrate to test for halides, we add nitric acid first. When we add barium chloride to test for sulfate, we add hydrochloric acid first. And the reason we do that is to remove and react with the carbonate ions and prevent barium carbonate from forming. So barium carbonate is just as insoluble as barium sulfate. They tend to have the same trends in solubility, and it will be a white precipitate because it is just a group 2 carbonate and they are all white in colour. So I've got some new courses coming soon on calculations. I've got my OCR A-level masterclasses and predicted papers coming out soon as well. So make sure that you're on my mailing list so that you don't miss anything. You can do that by just messaging me, or you can go to my website where I have just fixed all the links for my practice exam style questions and other videos on there. And of course, you can follow me on Instagram and Facebook for more A-level chemistry tips.